Welcome, bienvenue. Welcome to Property Quorum. The music didn't work at all this time. Let's try it again. I'll put it down in the background. There we go. Lovely. Once again, I was going to say four horsemen. That's not fair. The four stalwarts of Property Quorum are here to help you disseminate what in Sam's name is actually going on. Of course, we have Juliet Babula of Gunner Cook, Chris Gilson of Root Home, Hamish McClay of Search and Convey, our Lord and Master, and of course myself of the many purple hats. Today's topic is the great stamp duty shake-up. And of course, as per usual, we're going to start with Hamish McClay.
Well, no surprise, really. We're having so many shake-ups, aren't we, over the last sort of 15 months or so. And the next one under the microscope appears to be stamp duty, although we haven't actually resolved any of the other bits and pieces. But stamp duty is another one that now needs to be sort of going through some kind of transition or not. There's all sorts of talk, but there is always talk relative to budgets appearing. And of course, like a lot of other things, we never know quite when this budget is going to actually sort of take place. Is it going to be an immediate, things going to happen immediately, or are they going to happen in 2026? That we will never know until we actually sort of come upon the time when it's released. But stamp duty is a conversation which keeps rearing its sort of head, because like so many other things that require some kind of reform, stamp duty is one of those. And as we know, even the best of us or the worst of us can have a challenge in establishing how much stamp duty should be paid. But if you're going to complicate the issue, as is suggested, that you pay it whether you're buying and or selling or both, it does make it sound as though it's going to be quite a cumbersome thing. Although it's suggested not to the benefit, it would appear, of the individuals having to pay the stamp duty, but to the benefit of the government if they spread it over a time period, because somehow or other it makes the government look more efficient. Anyway, enough of that. I guess we have to wait, but what are the challenges going to be if they do tickle with the stamp duty rather than removing it and giving it a complete shake-up? They're actually going to make it all the worse.
Well, lovely. What a positive note to start with. Juliet, may I ask you, this so-called tickling that Hamish has referred to, is this something that we've been waiting for some time, or is it just frankly somebody just playing around the edges?
I mean, with this new government, I think shake-up is definitely the right word, or the right adjective to describe everything that we've gone through. And it's almost as if they've got these socialist policies that they just need to bombard us with, whether or not the outcome is considered. So it would be a great thing if stamp duty, the duties collected from the sale of properties, if we could see what that's being used for. When you've got a situation where you've got local authorities going bust, etc., where exactly is that money going? And initially, when they, increased all of these taxes, increased VATs on school fees and things like that, what you had was that people left the country. So the income that they thought they were going to get, they didn't get. So if that is anything to go by, this whole stamp duty shake-up could result in people finding alternative schemes. And I'll give you an example. If you've got a company that owns a property, instead of transferring that property in the usual way to a buyer, you might just want to sell the shares of that company to a buyer and avoid stamp duty altogether. So the buyer is purchasing the company and not purchasing the property per se, so it doesn't attract stamp duty. So if you have people using these clever tools, then you're not going to get the type of, funds that you think you're going to get by shaking up the stamp duty world. Also, there's proposals about, stamp duty being paid by the sellers. Is that then going to, again, dissuade people from selling their property in the usual way and actually just transferring it to an SPV, transferring it to a special purpose vehicle company and sell the shares of that company? So it's one of those things where the decision makers need to have experts on side to assist in the decision making. You can't just make these decisions because this is what your government stands for, and you create a shake-up, and it's going to help the economy in 10 years time or whatever it is. It can cause or can have a debilitating effect if it's not implemented correctly.
Well, it seems that the socialists have an agenda, and we are going to know all about it. And it also appears, Juliet says, it depends on the company you keep. Chris, well, how does it affect people like yourself?
I think Juliet's already alluded to it, that there are people who are in the market, developers, investors, who they're wise to the games that the government plays. The latest announcements just sound like the government's cottoned on to a new way to rob the public. Again, just to echo what Juliet said, the people who were going to pay, who were looking at the Labour government, who were looking at levying the taxes on, they've left, they've gone. There's no way to. We've said this. I've said this on the show many times. You can't tax your way into prosperity. It just doesn't work like that. You've got to create opportunity, and it's the private sector that will generate all that opportunity and all that revenue, which will give you an opportunity to then tax. But if you start levying taxes left, right, and centre, it's not going to be very productive. So I get the idea. The Americans have the model that's being mooted. I'm not sure how well it works over there. It's not a market that I'm particularly familiar with, and I'm sure that they don't appreciate having to pay their property taxes every year. And I can see it as a very slippery slope in this country, because every tax that seems to come in, the successive governments year on year seem to keep tightening the noose around people's necks and making it much more difficult to survive in this country, and the belief that they can tax into prosperity. So yeah, it's an interesting situation. I don't think it's the solution. This government is probably mooting it because they've already thrashed the daylights out of the SDLT regime and the new tax bandings that they've created and the havoc that they've created. That, as our guests have already said, this government seems to like shaking things and breaking things, but it doesn't really have a plan about how it's going to put the stuff back together.
I seem to remember there was a track by a band early 80s called Limp Bizkit, or in the early 90s called Limp Bizkit, and one of the biggest tracks was breaking stuff. It just feel like the lyrics of that have been taken far too literally by this government. Do you think this is a good idea at the moment? Is this what the public needs, Hamish?
Oh, well, absolutely not. Not at this particular sort of stage. As we found already, and appears to be the case, it has sort of rather fripped people off carrying out certain moves, because they don't really, people don't know what's going to happen. That we noticed sort of earlier this year and tail end of last year as well, many people leaving the sort of property market to the extent that they had been the smaller landlords, and they were finding it was just getting so cumbersome with these particular sort of properties. Now, I think any step that's likely to be made, the problem is if a landlord takes the property off, decides that they're going to move, that leaves that property empty temporarily. And what we're finding at the moment is nothing to do really with anything other than the fact that conveyancing has become cumbersome because of the demands they put on the likes of Juliet. So that we've got a twofold scenario. People themselves don't have that level of confidence. And of course, as a consequence, they're putting that little bit of an extra pressure onto the people who are actually doing the legal side of things for them. And because of the complexities which are now evolving, it's beginning to stretch that a little bit longer. Another week here, another week there, and a little cumbersome sort of change here. And because of that, basically, people are thinking, well, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. So the people sat around waiting for something to happen that's going to make a difference, rather than the usual thing, oh, here's a great opportunity, let's move forward. Because if you dive into this, you think if the market just carried on being as it had been earlier in the year, people could get themselves into all sorts of trouble rather than an expectation. As I said, the other aspect is whatever the change is going to be, when is it going to impact? Because you do not know. We know from previous actions that there's certain things going to take place next year, and people are actually already acting to avoid having to pay the additional parts. They're trying to avoid doing that. So it's not going to help the market in any way at all, I believe, in a positive nature, to the extent that we require in this country a buoyant property market for, in fact, the whole economy to be on a straightforward keel. If we get that twist, the whole sort of thing changes. So we've really got to avoid the issues that this government seems to be imposing upon us, and I can't see them having a clear way through it whilst they consider to keep considering new ways of, as Chris sort of says, imposing additional tax on people all the time. It does not work. We're so heavily taxed in this country as it stands, and to just put an additional burden on people, particularly those earning the property, as we well know, it's not going to help the situation. So the build target which they had, that's pretty well gone out of the window now, I think, anyway. And to get anywhere near it now and free up the properties that need to be freed up that people are going to be interested in, I think we're just getting further away from it.
Chris, you get a viewpoint whereby you can see how people are reacting to things because you're at the cold face, as it were. You're dealing with them. Are more and more people reticent to get involved in becoming landlords or taking on ownership of new property?
I've seen a slowdown in some of the clients that we've been working with, certainly for some of the challenges that we've been experiencing over the last 12 plus months now, primarily with this new extreme, shall we say, government and their policies. So there is a hesitancy from people. I'm seeing less instructions on the market. Less people selling. It's a lose-lose situation at this moment. The housing market, it drives one corner of our economy, and for the government to be seemingly actively crashing it is potentially a problem.
I mean, I'm trying to look at silver linings here. I mean, part of your policy is to buy up properties that accidental landlords no longer want to be involved with, because has that helped that?
In terms of, so we run a direct to vendor pipeline, and so we're constantly marketing for landlords and speaking with lots of different landlords who are looking to exit the market. Our leads have escalated significantly over the last 6 to 9 months or so, and they all tell us that they're selling up, leaving the country, going to places like Thailand and Cambodia where they can live like a king for the rest of their lives. That's their plan.
Wow. All right. Juliet, before I finish up with Hamish, does it seem, I mean, I'm not looking for a political statement here, but does it seem just economic madness? I listen to Gary's Economics every so often, and he is very firm on the idea of a wealth tax, specifically aimed at a very small echelon of the marketplace. If we were to bring that in, would that discourage even more of those people who are the property owners to be here, or would it make very little difference, do you think, in the current workplace, in the current marketplace?
Well, I think that the damage has been done. These sorts of mega wealthy have left. They've left. I mean, I've had people say to me, for example, someone had a client who was a race car driver, Formula One driver, and they are now based officially in Monaco because of the level of taxes. So all of those monies the UK has actually lost. And it's one of those things where I find, having lived in different countries, these laws are quite punitive. It's almost as if, I'm going to punish you. You want more, you'll have a punishment for that. And in a society where you want growth and you want that sort of, I guess, positive growth, those sorts of punitive rules and laws just aren't going to work. And that, I think, is something that ego needs to be set aside in the political arena, and that's just not going to happen. So where you've got a populace that are literally pawns in your game and you're moving them on a pawn board and you don't really care what the ramifications are, then people are going to have to look at what's best for them. And if it means leaving this country and migrating, etc., I think that will eventually happen. And what you'll see is that another government comes in and needs to reopen programs to incentivize people to come back in. So you're spending money on all of this, causing people to leave and then respending it to come back in. Brexit spells it all for me, quite frankly. Nobody thought about the after effect of Brexit. You gave a population the right to choose to get rid of our affiliation with Europe, and then all of a sudden the prices of everything have gone up. The construction industry is suffering. Why weren't the planners or the people that put Brexit to the public not fully aware of the repercussions of something like that? So it's going to be the same thing with the tax.
Good Lord. Hamish, would you, after a tumultuous property quorum, would you please take us home?
Well, the thing is, I was going to say it's sort of plainly obvious. It's obvious to some, although not to those masters that we have, if we wish to sort of call them, who are going to actually sort of impact upon the population, what their choices are. Whichever way we look, when we mentioned this sort of earlier in the week, possibly it was yesterday, fundamentally, the basic cost of living continues to go up. And it's those smaller items which are going up the most, the very, very basics of what we need. So we have that happening, which is, if you like, causing a sort of kind of pincer effect from one particular sort of direction on the general population, who themselves are losing confidence. So it's not encouraging people to get onto the, if you like, get in thinking about buying properties, because to buy a property, as we all know now, depends which part of the country you're in, of course. There are still parts of the country where there won't be any stamp duty. But it does seem to be a strange way of actually sort of doing it. You need wealthy people, because wealthy people spend money. And if the wealthy people aren't spending money, and those who are not so fortunate aren't spending money, what is going to happen to the economy? So basically, we're being hit from both sides here. And it's not an easy thing to actually sort of look the way through. I think we've got a pause situation. And whilst it's pausing, it's preventing the moving forward of the housing industry that everybody wants to see. Because if when a new house goes up somewhere, which wasn't there previously, it adds to the economy of that locality. If the houses aren't going up because the builders can't make money out of it, it's going to slow down their interest. And with the remediation going on in the backdrop, their focus is going to be on remediation, not building new properties. So,
long time watcher of the show and commentator Spencer Collins has asked, with London house prices falling and potential tax changes, how might first-time buyers face increased financial vulnerability and inequality, and what should policymakers do to ensure housing remains affordable? I'm going to throw that at you, Chris, initially. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the policymakers, they don't seem to listen to us anyway. So I think the first thing they could do is get their heads screwed on and surround themselves with people that we keep advocating. Surround yourself with people that can help you build your team properly. They have all the facilities and resources at their disposal, but for some reason refuse to either bring them together or even listen to them if they have brought them together. So ultimately, I think it's going to require a significant shake-up in those sorts of areas where people have that level of control. You're absolutely right, Spencer. People do need to be protected from those from the financial vulnerability and inequality that can exist in the housing market, especially in London. It's almost like a different country, the way the London housing market operates compared to the rest of the UK. So yeah, people who are living in the area, they definitely need some assistance, and a lot does need to change, I'm afraid.
Juliet, can I have a last thought from you?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's an anxiety that comes with uncertainty, and there's certainly a lack of confidence when, you know, a first-time buyer who, or a lot of fear where they don't actually know the repercussions of the things. So advice, surround your team, you know, yourself, as Chris has said, with the right team. That is imperative. And find out exactly what it's going to cost you, you know, stamp duty, refurbishment costs, all of it, so that you're able to do your homework and do your budgeting, so that you're sort of protecting yourself from those surprises. I think that, you know, that is the only way that you can protect yourself from that financial vulnerability, getting yourself informed. And the policymakers, well, they need a wake-up call. As far as I'm concerned, they're just on a binge. I mean, this country, as far as I'm concerned, has checks and balances, but they're not implemented. So these people just make decisions overnight, and everyone else can just deal with the after effects of it. And that is absolutely atrocious.
Hamish?
Well, there's not really much we can add at the moment. That we have a state of imbalance sort of right the way through, whereas the general public and, well, investors as well, because investors outside of this country can contribute quite effectively to the state of our economy, given the opportunity. But it's discouraging. It's discouraging those when we particularly hear things that all the prices are going down, like Spencer intimated. London used to be a great place for foreign investors to put their money because they could guarantee prices going up. And with everything sort of impacting upon it now, it's making it very difficult for foreign investors. As we know, there are many people leaving this country. They're getting rid of their properties before any of these additional costs are sort of imposed. People aren't buying those properties. There are more properties on the market, I believe, but the properties aren't shifting because, as we've said before, the confidence isn't there. And a few people can actually sort of make it, but unfortunately, it is not helping the whole of the economy as things stand. There's an awful lot needs to be done with the economy, as we well know. We have serious challenge with the cost of energy. And like we sort of found out last week, it's cheaper to actually get concrete from Europe. This seems an absurd thing, just particularly in view of what Juliet was just saying. Here we have Brexit, and it's cheaper to buy concrete from the continent with the additional taxes than it is to actually extract it from the ground in the UK. Seems a strange way to go.
In these strange times we are living in, where even with the application of tariffs and taxes and what have you, it says it's cheaper to get stuff from abroad. It's the very opposite of, I think, the intention of Brexit in the first place. Thank you all for contributing once again. Hamish McClay of Search Convey, Juliet Babulal of Gunner Cook, and of course Chris Gilson in the Brood Home. And thank you guys out there for watching. And thank you, Spencer, for commenting. Please, guys, you don't need to hold back. Please do comment. We do love it when we do. But until next week, try and keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. And even in these troubled times, please look after your mental health. Bye-bye now.